Okay, councillors, if you can make a start, please. Good evening. The council. By council, but if anyone else intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Okay, I'd also like to advise members that they should only address the meeting by the way of the microphones and remind them to turn their microphones off when they're finished speaking. Okay. Moving on, are there any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor Reardon, Councillor Spooner and Councillor Trubinski.
Is Councillor Spooner on the mend? Because I know he's been absent for. Okay, thank you.
Apologies from Councillor Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, substitute members.
Councillor Russell for Councillor Reardon.
Councillor Springett for Councillor Trubinski.
Councillor Round for Councillor Spooner.
Councillor Greenan for Councillor Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Are there any visit members? I can't see any. No. Okay, moving on. Okay, item 4, items withdrawn from the agenda. I believe there's anything to be withdrawn. No. Moving on then, date of adjourned meeting. Hopefully we shouldn't need this, but the adjourned meeting will be held on Monday the 16th of December 2024 if required. Okay, urgent updates. If you all look, you should have all had an urgent update. I intend to take these written and verbal updates as urgent items as they contain further information relating to matters to be considered at the meeting. I've also agreed to take the appeals list as an urgent item as it was by mistake left off the agenda. Okay. Do members want a couple of minutes to read the urgent update, or are they happy with it? Okay, move on then. Okay, item 7, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? I'll look to the left and work my way around as normal.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sitting here subbing tonight, but I have a closed mind with regards to items 16, 17 and 18. So I will remove myself from the committee, speak as a visiting member and then leave the room for the debate on those items. Thank you.
So, anyone else? Nope. Okay, moving on then. Item 8, disclosures of lobbying. Again, I'll start with yourself, Councillor Russell, and work my way around.
Item 13, 16, 17 and 18.
Items 13, 16, 17 and 18.
Yep. 13, 16, 17 and 18, Chair.
You're going to have a full house with this, Chair. 13, 16, 17 and 18.
13, 16, 17 and 18.
Thank you, Chairman. Items 13 and 15.
Items 13, 16, 17 and 18, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Items 13, 16, 17 and 18. Thank you.
Items 13, 16, 17, 18 and 19.
I'm going to trumpet 13, 15, 16, 17, 18 and 19.
I think I lose out. 13, 15, 16, 17, 18.
I'm not necessarily going to say all. There you go. Councillor Round.
I may well have been lobbied by many people, but as you know, I don't often sit on committees. I'm out morning, noon and night. I haven't seen an email since Friday, so I may well have been lobbied. I just don't know it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Round. Okay, moving on then. I move that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed? Thank you, councillors. Okay, item 10. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of November 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you, councillors. I'll find out at the end. I call upon Rob Jarman, Head of Development, to introduce this report under the third items.
Thanks, Chairman. So the first deferred item is on the papers tonight. The second item, the Orchard, Copper Lane, Marden, that has been withdrawn. And lastly, the third deferred item is on the papers tonight as well. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Moved on then. There is no, I believe there is no petitions. No. Okay, item 16. The George Benever Road Yalding, Maidstone, Kent. Just wait for Councillor Russell to leave. Okay. I'll just give way to Dr. Rob Jarman. He's got a little introduction on this.
Yeah, pithy introduction. I think there's been some sort of divergence of interpretation of what the original planning permission actually amounts to. So before you tonight, there's a proposal to amend what has been permitted. What has been permitted is a shop, a cafe, and a takeaway. So there's a slightly larger shop area and a slightly smaller cafe area in a different arrangement. Acceptable or not, in terms of the reasons for the original condition, these relate to solely the character of the area and residential amenity. So it's basically the same uses. So if you were to be against this, you'd have to identify specific harm. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Rob. This is the first of 3 applications for this site. The application was reported to the 26th September Planning Committee. The committee deferred a decision on the application to amend the application to state that it is retrospective. Secondly, the committee requested that we seek further information on compliance with conditions, size of the floor plan, and contemporary photography for the application. The questions raised by members have been addressed in the detailed report. So this is the application building on your screen. The next image on your screen is the original floor plan for the ground floor. So this is the plan that was approved in the last application before this current one was submitted. So as you can see on this plan, you have the retail farm shop area, restaurant with ancillary takeaway area marked in yellow, and then the kitchen area here, and the store is obviously marked shaded in white. Following the committee deferral, the applicant chose to submit a non-determination appeal to the Planning Inspectorate. This means that the final decision on this application will be taken by the Planning Inspector. The purpose of this report is to seek direction from the committee as to the approach officers should take to the council's submission to the Planning Inspectorate. The council has requested to the inspectorate to move the appeal submission deadline, but that has been declined. In these circumstances, it is the intention to report the planning inspectorate minutes of this committee meeting. In the absence of the appeal against non-determination, the officer recommendation would have been to grant planning permission as indicated earlier on by Rob. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Okay, we have some objectives to speak on this. Mr. Scott, Stroke, sorry. Oh. Stop. Okay.
Am I on? That's good news. I'll reset my timer. Good evening, everyone. My name is Howard Stott. We live 4 doors up from the George, almost next door in an attached terraced row. I'm also recovering from laryngitis, so please bear with me if the voice box doesn't hold out. I formally supported the applicant's original plans to create a farm shop and cafe, as it appeared that the George would continue to be a community resource. What we actually got offered none of this, other than ugly direct trade war and opposition to the existing Orchard View stores next door, selling much the same products and zero in terms of a community amenity. So we're sitting here today due to gamification of the planning system across 7 different applications. Please see it for what it is. The applicant has delivered nothing as promised. I refer next to the planning officer's 4 summary points in the final committee report, which claim that this application has, number 1, no harm to local character. In what month of Sundays is a kebab shop in a heritage and conservation area not a harm to local character? The kebab logo is already in use. It's obvious that this is just an application, it's a subdivision play, so access is available from the main road. Remember, the existing consent already allows a cafe and takeaway, but the applicant has chosen not to, perhaps because the approved plans do not facilitate a separate kebab shop. I'll consider the next 2 points in the report together as they further demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of what is actually happening here. And that's that there's no harm to neighbour amenity and no highways or parking issues. In the last month, 3 houses directly opposite the shop, the new shop, have come up for sale because of issues with the shop. Light pollution and the traffic chaos from the majority of customer cars stopping right outside on double yellows in an already bottlenecked road and gridlock village rather than using the car park behind, which has instead been left to ruin and is the subject of continued antisocial behaviour, and the police have been called a number of times. Yes, residents are already moving out of Yalding because of this development. The final point was that the report claims that this application is in accordance with local plan reviews, SP11 and CD1. Well, just no. If you look at these policies, they are explicit that the council will seek to maintain and enhance the existing retail function. Let's be clear here, existing retail is the incumbent Orchard View stores, not this shop. The Orchard View stores has been owned and run consistently with the community in mind by a lovely Asian family for decades. Meantime, since opening this year, this new retailer has done less than nothing to support or add to our vibrant community. I contend that by quoting these local policies, the officer has either misunderstood or misapplied their intent. Actually, what these policies suggest is that the incumbent Orchard View stores should be supported, and in this context, the enforcement notice on the applicant should be driven to a conclusion with decisive confidence, rather than us all receiving an even worse outcome. So please, if you've not seen with your own eyes the mess that has already been created by this application, it being retrospective, of course, please do not vote for approval until you see yourself the material harm to Yalding that has been caused and the further material harm that has been proposed by these applications.
Thank you, Mr. Stott. Okay. Gordon Parish Council, we have Councillor Brown.
Good evening, Chairman, members. The disappointment, frustration and anger of councillors and residents regarding this application has increased with the submission of the application for the 10-person HMO. Since the meeting on the 26th of September, there has been no attempt to tidy the site, and as you will see from the photographs we sent you, it is equally untidy inside. We are still asking the question as to how the original planning permission with its conditions, especially condition 6, which was put in place to preserve the character of the non-designated heritage asset set within Yalding Conservation Area, can be set aside at a whim because the applicant chose to ignore his permission and create nothing more than a convenience store. We put it to you, members, that had the application before you today come forward in the first instance, there would have been tremendous opposition, and looking at the evidence, it would have been refused. We do not understand why the planning officer seems to be supporting a retrospective application that to us is a major change in both use and layout from that permitted. The officer now concurs with us, however, that the percentage retail now proposed far exceeds that of the original application. The introduction of a second convenience store immediately adjacent to the existing is not sustainable, and our fear is that both shops will fail. There is equal concern that if the subject of this application fails, what will become of that ground floor? We are already seeing support for the existing shop over the new, where local residents are boycotting Yalding Supermarket in favour of Orchard View stores. However, as the former is open very late in the evening, they are picking up some passing trade, causing highway problems with the parking on the double yellow lines outside rather than in the car park. Although the extensive garden is shown on the site plan for both applications, nowhere is there mention of its intended use. The application title includes the wording, existing front doors to be retained. If this refers to the plate glass doors that have been installed in place of the traditional style doors, this must be refused and the traditional doors reinstated. No mention has been made in the application to the windows at the ground floor, which are again now plate glass, do not match the other windows on the front elevation and must be replaced with traditional style windows. The Bull Public House conversion in Yalding High Street was conditioned that the traditional style doors and windows were retained, including the frosted glass and etchings. We note from the proposed condition 5, we'd like to see, if this goes ahead, the removal of the word additional. We urge members to recommend refusal of this application in its current guise and insist it be brought back to somewhere near its original permission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. The location of this is in the middle of Yalding Conservation Area, and the former public house is a non-designated heritage asset, which forms a very visual part of the historic street scene within the Yalding Conservation Area. To be clear, there is an extant planning permission for this site that the applicant could build out at any time he chose. He did not choose to follow this path. So here we are. I'll give you a bit of background. So some signage went up, backlit neon signage on the side of the historic building announcing the presence of Mr. Dan's Takeaway, complete with backlit images of a doner kebab, rotisserie and burgers. This was reported to enforcement and subsequently removed. I've included this to illustrate that the applicant has no regard for the historical fabric of this building or the historic setting within which it's located. At the date of writing, there are 3 open planning enforcement cases for this site on the Maidstone database, one of which looks to be for unauthorised operational development. The change of use application was permitted on the 9th of August, and the applicant had been in consultation with the parish council and was offered full support to the original application. Drawing number 200 proposed plans clearly shows a restaurant and takeaway service combined with a shop that is titled a retail farm shop. That is what the village was sold. Now we have this, a Section 73 retrospective application following enforcement action that was carried out on the site. It seeks to gain approval to a completely different floor layout for the shop and to a very different type of establishment from what was originally permitted. Many of the previous applications' pre-commencement conditions from the original planning permission were not complied with, such as condition 3, which requested an archaeological report to be produced prior to the renovation starting. Whilst not the subject of this appeal, I would like you to be cognizant of the other appeal for the HMO, for the other application for the HMO, which is coming. So the applicant will seek to alter the upstairs layout of the property, turn it into a 10-bed HMO, which I'll get onto later. Detailed representations, again, I note that the committee report has been updated and says that the scale of the proposed changes would not be harmful to the local character. Given the setting, the jarring form of the internal layout of the shop, which can be clearly seen here, which is very different to the retail farm shop that was written about in the planning of the original one, this does nothing to complement the area. There is harm caused by introducing this modern urban unit into the local character of Yalding Village. They said the harm caused by the removal of the internal staircase is outweighed by the benefits. I question who is benefiting by its removal. Its removal has allowed the applicant to put more modern racking into the shop layout, whilst also determining that this increased floor space has been changed because of that. It's the staircase that allows more racking, to be clear. They said there's no harm to neighbouring amenity and no highways or parking issues. Well, there is, you will see, an objection from the KCC local councillor on this issue. This is a highly congested area in narrow historic roads that are now heavily trafficked and the only lorry route through the arterial road through the village.
Sorry, Councillor Round, can I ask you to wrap up? You'll have to 3 minutes.
Yeah, premises is next door to an existing shop. I'm just going to close by saying you'll be warned of cost warnings for appeals. We lose various appeals all the time. You'll be told that you need to come up with planning policy. You don't. That's what they're for. You need to come up with reasons for harm. You can have an adjournment and get them to come up with the policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Okay. Councillor Summersgill, I'll go to you for the board member.
Thank you very much. Yes, I can back up what most of the speakers have said so far. The Bull Public House was conditioned to keep its frontage as it was to benefit the high street. I can't understand why this on the main street there is allowed to have lights flashing out almost and clear windows and the doors changed. It has substantially changed from the discussion that was held at Parish Council many months ago, and it was a restaurant and part retail with farm shop, and it's now not even operating as a cafe. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just for the sake of clarity, this is what's called a Section 73 application. It's to vary two conditions. So the first one is a pretty standard condition saying the development should be carried out in accordance with the plans hereby submitted. Very common condition. And the reason is always important. It states to clarify which plans have been approved. So that's just a matter of just reading what the plan numbers are. What it doesn't say is that the doors, the staircase, the windows, what have you, need to be maintained in perpetuity. It doesn't say that, and it shouldn't say that because it's not a listed building. So don't understand the point about that. I apologize for lack of clarity in communication of that, but that's all the application is seeking with regard to front doors, staircase, etc. And then secondly, the other condition, condition 6, that is proposed to be changed. As I said in my presentation, what was granted planning permission originally was a shop and a cafe and a takeaway. And that's what you've got now. It wasn't a farm shop. Well, sorry, there's no, well, can you point to me where it says farm shop in the permission, the description of development? No, because it didn't say farm shop. And there's no separate use class for farm shops. I don't think we should have done this, but then it was something to do with the previous owners, run a successful business, but there's no personal permission. So anybody can run this retail establishment. So it's quite common with retail for the configuration of the layouts to change. And as I said earlier, what has happened is that the shop has got slightly larger and the cafe area has got slightly smaller. So that's what's before you, and that is what is at appeal. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yarman. Councillor Springett.
Thank you. I've been following this for quite a long while. We've seen so many floor plans, different ones at licensing, different ones here. This is just a classic example of how to play the system, and it's disgraceful. The applicant has misled the residents to get their support. He's ignored conditions. He's sending a message out that actually you can just do what you want and you'll get away with it because they'll roll over. And I'm really cross about this. I actually would like to recommend that we do refuse this application on harm to the conservation area by the changing of the windows and the doors. I think that's harmed the street scene and the appearance of the conservation area. It's failing to support or enhance the local businesses. I'm really not happy with this one. If it's going to be approved, I would like a condition added that the windows and doors are restored to their original condition to restore the street scene in the conservation area to its previous state. So I'm really unhappy with this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cleater.
Yep, so I don't live in Yaldin, so I've got no skin in this game, but Val touched on this. This is basically an applicant who's playing the system and is totally disregarding any conditions. 3 enforcement notices, we've been told, are in play on this. I sat through the first one. This is somebody who had absolutely no intention, as I see it, from the 2 lots of times I've read these papers, has any sort of wish to conform, wants to do what they like. Now, I know we always go on about it's going to cost us money. Well, it may well do, but if we don't start putting a line in the sand on stuff like this, we're not saying don't have a shop, we're not saying don't have a cafe, but there is no cafe there, let's be quite honest. They'll be lucky to be a few chairs while they sit and eat their kebabs. So for me, I think the fact that this applicant, as we can see further down the agenda, just goes and does things and then thinks, oh, I'll come back, and then just ignore it. I think that tells me all I need to know. I think Councillor Springett has highlighted all the issues not being in keeping, the disruption to local residents. I mean, if you're going to have a takeaway, you could at least do up the car park, which they haven't done. I'll save the rest of that for another application that's in. It just seems to me that what are we here for as a planning committee if these things keep letting slide? You know, that's, I know I'm new to the committee, but I'm finding it deeply frustrating at the moment. But I would concur with Councillor Springett at the moment on refusal.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. I would, as the officers have highlighted, this is a change. The permission for the shop and the takeaway are already granted. Okay, so I'm just highlighting that we're not refusing that. Okay, Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there's been a lot of naivety on show here. Planning is a hard business. It's a regulatory function. It is, if we do not have the appropriate conditions, you don't get what you want. What we are seeking to do here, working with the applicant, is to regulate what's going on and gain some control. If anybody thinks that we could win an appeal, everyone doesn't. It's like it's making a stand. But the problem is we'll lose that appeal, and you know that inspectors don't like conditions, and even in negotiation with the officers, they're always very condition light. So the reality is we could have a Pyrrhic victory this evening, and then what will happen is that we will get an inspector overturn and take a very laissez-faire approach where we'll have less control than if we agree on our own terms this evening. And I think there's a lesson here for everybody going forward, that don't get too personally invested in planning applications, and make sure the conditions are damn right, because a site with permission could be sold on tomorrow. And we know, I mean, you've been on planning long enough to know that planning is not like that. You need to get it right first, or you have problems like this. I think we need to make the best of a bad job, and I will therefore move an amendment that we do approve as per the papers, and the urgent update and the detail that we've got before us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harwood. Is it seconded? Okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor Nagy. Do you want to speak now, or do you want to reserve your right?
I'm going to say we've had this come up a couple of times, and I think obviously I can see that there is a lot of passion behind this, and that there is a lot of personal involvement on this. At the end of the day, we are here for planning, and there are legislations and local plans in place to deal with these sort of situations. And as far as I'm aware, that there has been enforcement in place to deal with problems that arise from an applicant not following their plans. We are not enforcement, we are planning. And as such, we have to make a decision on whether the stairs and the doors are to be removed. I think obviously there is a lot going on with this building that is distracting us from the point of this particular application. So if we are going to move forward and make a decision, we should be focusing purely on this particular application and what it applies to this building, rather than getting distracted with the MHO that is in the following plan, which we can discuss in a minute. Let's focus on what we are here to discuss and make a decision on that. As far as I'm concerned, if the application here is to look at the removal of the stairs and the doors, it's not a listed building, so therefore they're within their right to do so. And secondly, we should be focusing on just this particular point. Sorry to get this bit flustered, but that's all I have to say on that one. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Nagy. Councillor Springett, then Councillor Cox, and then Councillor Thompson.
With respect, we approve things with conditions, Councillor Harwood, to make them acceptable. And then when two fingers are stuck up to those conditions, I get very upset. If we're going to approve this, I would like a condition added that the windows and doors are restored to their original condition. It's within a conservation area. It's an appearance of the conservation area and its street scene. And I do not think it's unreasonable to ask for that to be done. I also would like to pick up what was said by the Yalding Parish Councillor, whose name has escaped me for the minute, but it will come back in a minute, and remove the word additional on condition 5, which was additional signage, because the signage that went up was atrocious. So I don't want any additional signage. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Springett. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. This application feels like death by 1,000 cuts to me. You know, you start off with something, you think that you've got your arms around it, it's going to look like this, and it's looking like something else. So I'm absolutely sympathetic. I think the conditions on page 149 look like multiple choice. I think the syntax is wrong, that they could be interpreted that you could have a cafe or a restaurant or a takeaway, and a couple of places we say and. I think they need to be strengthened. I think they all need to say and. So there are 4 functions. And I think they also need to be in the proportions shown on the plan. You can't just have a coffee machine shoved in a corner and call it a cafe and the rest full of shops. So I think we just need to be a bit more specific on that. I'm also really worried about conservation area. You know, it's not listed, but it is a conservation on the outside, and that's what people see. And to me, conservation areas aren't just the building, they're the amenity. So it's how people move around. If they're parking all over the place, then that's a concern. And I think we should try and put some controls around that. I absolutely agree on the windows and doors being restored point. I'd also like to see some controls around the signs, and you know they've already got some there, but again, back to it being a conservation area, that's what gives the amenity. And my final point, and I promise I'll be quiet, is removal of staircase worries me because you know sometimes those are actually structural. Thank you.
Okay. I think I'm beating Mr. Jarman back here, but we have to be clear about what we're deciding on. The parking, for example, that was all agreed at the previous application, and I agree completely with Councillor Springett and Councillor Cleater that this is a bit of a mistake in one sense. But the applicant has followed, and he's played the system, and we didn't get the conditions right at the initial application. If we had listed about the windows, the doors in those conditions, I believe they could have possibly held. But we can't apply retrospective conditions, if I'm correct. Okay, to go with that, I will bring Mr. Jarman back in because obviously he wants to clarify a few things that I've probably said, and then I'll go to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to hear the officer's clarification of that point before I make my remark. Thank you.
Okay, sort of negative and positive, darkness and light. So, as I've said a number of times now, condition 2 merely says the development should be carried out in accordance with these drawing numbers. So, as long as the applicant has done that for 1 hour a day, that condition's been met. There's no enforcement at all. Otherwise, it wouldn't be before you tonight. It's an application to vary that condition. But more to the point, whatever the doors looked like, and the staircase, etc., etc., we simply did not ask for the doors and the staircase to be maintained. There is no mention of that whatsoever. So it'd be peculiar to put on, as the chairman said, a sort of retrospective condition on that. However, I'm conscious that it's out of our control in that the applicant has appealed. So it's before the planning inspectorate, as the case officer has pointed out. So we can make representations to the planning inspectorate and say that we want the original doors and staircase put in. I don't rate our chances, but we can do it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jarman. In which case, if you didn't hear me before, I second Councillor Springett's proposal that we do precisely this. It is my business in other places to comment on, scrutinise and set standards for economic development in this council. It is important that our rural centres thrive. It is important that we bring encouragement to the thriving of our rural centres. The multiple ambitions for retail and food provision in this area, to the tastes of some, is noted and in principle welcome. All of that only makes sense if there is a sense of good faith in operation between those who propose, those who set out to invest, those who buy, those who offer their commercial services, and the community in which they live. I decry the situation that we have seen develop over recent months. I don't believe I was party to its beginning, but at this point, I would like to reinforce the point that we've just made about a small contribution to the restoration of the street scene and a meaningful contribution to the character of the local area, which is well known to me, and I will confess that my family grew up in the area, so I do have an interest in that regard. It would be an opportunity, if perhaps beyond the formal business of this, as Councillor Harwood quite properly points out, serious committee with its legal implications, to put in writing our feelings about this with specific requirements and indeed invite the good faith response of the applicant to put right some of these wrongs. Unusual, peculiar, I believe is the word that the officer used. Well, let's be peculiar because it would be a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I hate to labour this, but faith doesn't really come into planning. We are a legislative committee and we have to play by those rules, unfortunately. No, it's quite clear in our terms what we are. It's not up for discussion, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Cleater.
Yeah, point of clarification for me. I've heard a lot of these conditions should have been put in, but like apart from Councillor Harwood and maybe Councillor Springett, who have vast experience in this field, I'm not a planner. So are we saying that our officers should have thought of those conditions rather than wait for us to put conditions on there in terms of recommendations? I know we can do so afterwards, but if we're saying that this is, you know, in the where is it, the Yalding conservation area, etc., should that not have been brought by the officers for us to object or not to, rather than us having to play catch up in a meeting? I just want that clarification as a new member. By the way, I've only ever visited Yalding twice in my life, so I have no particular passion for Yalding. I'm sorry. I just like people to play fairly in the system.
I'll go to Mr. Jarman.
Sorry to keep coming back. I think it, you know, obviously it depends on one's perception, doesn't it? If the council had wanted a farm shop, permission for a particular applicant, a particular minimum space for a cafe, a particular seating arrangement, what have you, then yes, that should have been the subject of specific conditions, but it wasn't. So on the back of a Section 73 application to vary two conditions, you can't sort of reimagine the past. It's good because it's simply unreasonable.
Councillor Springett, and then I'm going to just go to Councillor Harwood to ask whether he wants to take that amendment to the conditions with his proposal. Okay.
Thank you. I'm not sure which was condition 2 and which was 6 and which applies to which. The removal of the stairs, I'm not arguing. That's going to come back and bite him on fire regulations at somewhere, I'm sure. I'm not worried about that. And I'm also not worried about the layout. It's inside a building. The bit that bothers me is the doors and windows. So I don't know which condition they were on 2 and 6. Can we, I presume we can't do a split decision to say that we're happy with condition 6, but we're not happy with condition 2? Just a question, because you're mentioning his approval was accordance with the drawings. Did the drawings say it was going to change the windows and the doors? Because I suspect they probably didn't. I suspect they didn't, in which case he hasn't complied with the approved drawings.
Sorry, unfortunately, condition 2 isn't set out in full, but it's the last bullet point on page 141. So as I said, it's a common condition. It just says the development hereby permitted shall be carried out in accordance with the approved plans, and then the approved plans will have drawing numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Yeah. And what I'm saying is two things: is to legally comply with that condition, you just have to have it for, I don't know, 24 hours. There's nothing in law that you can just, it'd be almost impossible to say that that condition wasn't complied with. And the reason for it, as I keep saying, was nothing to do with the heritage of the building. You know, sorry to say that, but to quote, it just says to clarify which plans have been approved. So if you have drawings number 1, 2, and 3, you know, it ticks a box because you're clearly making the distinction between the drawings and making it clear what, you know, what's been approved. So it would be very difficult to argue harm on the back of a Section 73 application, varying the condition that made absolutely no mention whatsoever about the heritage value of the doors, the stairs, or the windows, or anything.
So
Councillor
if he weatherboarded the entire front of the building in pink weatherboard, that wouldn't be a problem because he didn't say it in the plans, but it's okay. I'm just trying to find where
Well,
that
that would
combined
be a
with-
different matter if he put on pink weatherboarding, then yes, that could be new development, but this is a Section 73 application to vary conditions 2 and 6. And condition 6, just to finish it all off, that was the closest we get to any sort of floor space.
Okay, can I suggest, Councillor Spring, rather than make that a condition, I know you're not gonna like this in one sense, we make that, because this isn't actually in our hands anymore, remember, this is in the inspector's hands, that we make the doors and the windows a informative, that we'd like them to be done, and then we approve as per the papers, as per the proposer and the seconder, with the amendment for the informative. And but it's up to the proposer and the secretary on that, but I don't think actually, I don't think actually we can, because obviously, again, he could just put in for an application, you take the additional out, you can still put in for an application just for signage, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Harwood, are you happy to take that informative?
Because it's a Section 73, all we can do is put on informatives for things that are additional because it's a variation of plans. That's what they're seeking. So it's a procedural challenge that we're up against here on this particular application. And on the point that Mr. Jarman didn't really answer as to where the naivety came from, I think there was naivety on all sides, frankly. And I genuinely think that there is a real problem with the approach that we're increasingly taking of just having very simple permissions referencing drawings and not setting out hard and fast rules around which the development will apply, because we have had problems on countless applications because of that, where all of the quality issues that we seek in terms of materials, in terms of renewables, in terms of niches for wildlife and things are going out the window, and we go to enforcement, they can't be enforced because we find there's been a Section 73 change to some drawings and we've lost everything. So I think that I want this to be a kind of a wake-up call, not just to us lot, who is the kind of lay members, but also to officers, that the kind of old checklist approach almost that we took, it's more thorough and it helps enormously in situations such as this. So essentially all we can do is put informatives, and we can try and see what the inspector thinks, but I think we should move on and not do it again.
So just on that note, you've just highlighted about the checklist. So you're proposing that that's something that me, yourself, and the vice chair can work with the planning officers to produce. Okay. On that note, then I have a proposer and seconder, plus with the informative on there as well. Yeah, but Councillor Spink to have a seconder. I'm actually formally nominated. I don't think she did you? At the time.
I did make a proposal, but I will withdraw that on here in the items.
Okay, so we're moving with Councillor Harwood's proposal with the informative. Okay, so all in favour? Okay, that's 6 in favour. Those against? That's 5 against and abstaining and 1 abstention. Okay, that is approved. Okay, thank you, councillors. Okay. Councillor Russell. Moving on, I don't think the next one will be any easier. Okay, I move to the officer, introduce George again.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the second application for the same site. This application seeks to change the use of the existing 7-bedroom dwelling to a 7-bedroom house in multiple occupation. The national legislation allows for the use of a property as an HMO for 6 occupants. Planning permission is required in this case as the proposal is for more than 6 occupants. The slide on your screen is the applications site. The next slide, it's the existing first floor and then proposed first floor plans. The current proposal does not include any physical, internal, or external changes to the building. The accommodation is currently accessed via a metal staircase located to the rear of the building, which is on your screen currently. There is no local plan policy that restricts this type of housing in different parts of the borough. As such, there are no valid planning reasons to resist the principle of this application. The proposals are acceptable with regards to the standard of accommodation provided, neighbor amenity, highways, parking, including its effects on the yielding conservation area. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions and no further material planning consideration raised from a consultation response from the Environment Agency. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have objector, Mr. Simmons. Speak.
There. Good evening. Houses in multiple occupation do serve an important role in society. When I lived in Diggs as a young man, however, I had little money and no car. I would never have chosen to live in a place like Yalding then. So location is my first reason for objecting this application. First, 1, location. HMOs are usually placed in city centres for good reasons. Access to a lot of transport, facilities and resources, and a choice of shops. As a relatively rural community, Yalding has very limited transport and only 2 now competing shops. The train station is over a mile's walk away from the village, longer if you avoid the fields. The bus to Maidstone runs only intermittently. This means that tenants would have to have their own transport, making it unattractive to young or vulnerable people with limited resources. They would also need to compete for parking space. The location is totally unsuitable. 2, flooding. I remember very well when the George was flooded in deep water a few years ago. In the past, there has only ever been one family upstairs to deal with it. An HMO would trap several households or individuals, and now there's only one fire escape style exit in case of fire or flood, with a gate at the end of it, I think. The owner previously said his own family would be living there. Well, this isn't true, and probably never was the intention at all. Filth and rubbish, number 3. The whole site continues to be full of debris. You should have a look at it. And has been a massive eyesore since the start. It is likely that the owner will treat his tenants and the HMO itself with the same lack of respect he has shown the property and the wider community. It has also become a magnet for antisocial behaviour. 4, regulation. HMOs are licensed and regulated and subject to many rules. Based on what he's done so far with the shop, the applicant has shown no signs of adhering to any regulations. 5, the building itself. The George had an important and ancient historical place in the village and within the conservation area. If it could not be a pub anymore, it should have been treated sympathetically and not systematically vandalised. It seems possible to me that an HMO was the reason the applicant took on the property in the first place. The current store only gets passing trade, for I personally know of no one who actually uses it, preferring to support the long-standing shop next door. How long will it be before the store is considered non-viable, is closed, and is finally converted to something else?
Why put a convenience store, which should have been a farm shop and restaurant, right next to another store in a small community? I suspect that the HMO upstairs is not the end of the story. The applicant has misled us all.
Sorry,
He
Mr.
will
Simmons.
continue to do so.
Mr. Simmons,
Yep,
you've had your 3 minutes, please.
unless
Can
you
I ask you
take
to
us
wrap up?
down. Saying right, that's it. Bit longer than I normally time myself.
Okay, Councillor Brown, the Yalding Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Our frustrations continue at the treatment of our beloved George Public House to the detriment of the conservation area and local resources. At last week's full council meeting, we heard from members of the fear of oversaturation of the borough with HMSOs and harm and they are causing in the urban area and how this could escalate into the rural communities. There are contradictions in the planning officer's report with regard to highways and parking. He tells us that car ownership for occupiers of HMSOs is generally lower than for other types of residential accommodation. He says makes HMOs better placed in sustainable locations such as Yalding, with its limited bus service to Maidstone. As such, occupants would not need to be reliant upon a private motor vehicle for daily needs. Confused? So are we. Our limited bus services means no buses from after 6:30 p.m. Monday to Saturday, none on Sunday. The train station is not easily accessible to the village centre, so without a car, access to the cinema, siestas, clubs, other pubs in the parish even, or other entertainment is not easy and sometimes unsafe. Similarly, there is limited employment in the area and car travel is most often necessary. The accommodation has always been used by one family. The intensification of use as an HMO for 10 people, particularly late at night or early morning, will be intrusive to neighbouring residential properties. As a larger village, we are told that there are local plan policies to increase the population to support local services and facilities. That's why 10 people. The plans for the George take away any important facility, whilst local plans like allocations will have increased population with some additional 200 homes built or to be built. The flood risk assessment is out of date, having had a major flood since its production. The entire ground floor, garden, car park, roads outside the property and beyond are inundated with floodwaters at times of heavy flooding. It is the local authority's responsibility to ensure that there is safe passage on foot to the nearest Zone 1, which is Yalding High Street. Although there is a large garden shown within the curtilage of the application site plan, no mention has been made of any use of amenity land for the benefit of proposed residents. If members support this application, we believe that the numbers should be reduced. We understand that planning permission cannot be refused for 6 or below. Therefore, please reduce this number to 6 and apply conditions that do safeguard the existing residents, future tenants of the HMO and the surrounding conservation area. Thank you. I'm sorry I got muddled with the tax office.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Russell again.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Well, sounds like it's already a bit ruined. Why don't we just ruin it a little bit more? This is not a sustainable location for an HMO. I know we face issues in the centre of town. I know we face issues in other areas, but I think it's been clearly demonstrated that they are more sustainable areas to actually have this number of people located in. Now, I know you're going to be told that permitted development is up to 6, so what's the harm in one more? Well, I think you can see what's the harm in everything piecemeal with this site. And the particular reason for this is that we are in flood zone 3. In a flood, and in particular, this place in Yalding, this street was where David Cameron was boating down the street in 2013. The harm is not just to the people that live there, it's to all the people that have to try and get them out of there in times of flood and get them to areas of safety. As I understand it, there should be a flood risk assessment that should be provided with applications in flood zone 3. I don't see that here. We don't have the response from the statutory consultee and the Environment Agency. Now, ordinarily, I would say let's defer this to get that, but I think we know what happened last time. So I would recommend that we refuse this, and then hopefully, if this comes back as another application, those things will be provided and we can properly look at them before we look to put more people in this flood zone 3 area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you. Speaking as flood warden for an adjacent parish, I find it astounding that the flood risk assessment is dated 2011, and we've had a significant flood in 2013 since then. There's no evacuation route provided, as we would expect to see and have seen for other applications. No route for escape has been provided, and there is a single bathroom shown for 10 occupants on these drawings because nothing's changing. I cannot understand that in an HMO, but that may be a separate regulation.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. No, Councillor Spitali.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on point 6.3, 630, where it says that usually HMO occupants are less likely to have cars, and so therefore parking isn't an issue. That can't be true in a rural situation, especially when there's sporadic buses. So I'd dispute that as a true statement, and I think we should add that to the reason why not to like this proposal and refuse it.
Councillor Springett.
Thank you. I'm a little bit confused about this staircase that's shown or isn't. So the staircase that was taken out on the ground floor, has that also been taken out on the second floor? Because if that is the case, on the first floor, there are 4 bedrooms shown to the front of the building, and they're only way out of the buildings to the back to the fire escape. So if there was a fire in that corridor, they can't get out. As the same for the people in the 2 bedrooms above. So we've got plans here that I don't think are accurate, because I think that middle staircase has gone, which looks like there are alternative exits. So I am concerned that the plans are wrong. And my question is, fire escapes and safety and fire, is that a building regs matter? Is that a matter for building regs, and how do we ensure that there is safety in the event of a fire? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you, Chair. We've just checked the bus route to Yalding, if it bothers to turn up, if it's anything else like the bus services out to the other areas. The fact is, if this went through with 10 rooms, and some of them are for 2 people, I believe, not just 1, then they're all going to need a place to park their car. I can see in the photograph previously that there's all sorts of stuff stacked up at the back, which is a fire hazard. There are bins stored under the fire escape, again, a fire hazard. It is a metal stairway, which would be quite dangerous, and I'm not convinced that the landlord will be out putting salt down in the bad weather, etc.
Sorry, Councillor Cleaver, can I just quickly come in, because just been talking to
Yeah.
Mr. Jarman. I think we're going to have to defer this on the basis of what we had done in the previous application. The plans submitted are not correct. Okay.
Oh, what a surprise.
So on that basis, and on the Environment Agency not, and I'll bring Mr. Jarman in so you can actually update properly.
Yeah, as Councillor Summerskill stated,
Why was this not checked?
it's in flood zone 3. It is in, it is residential above the shop already, but nevertheless, we do need the views of the Environment Agency, and we cannot rely on an assessment from 2011. Plus what the chairman said as well, and that also overlaps with fire risk as well. Thanks.
So I'm going to propose we defer. Okay, I've got a seconder.
Can I just ask a question? I know you're voting to defer, but isn't this how we got in a mess with the first one? So, sorry, I'm just finding this all very frustrating.
Sorry, Councillor Clear, on the first one, we deferred it because we wanted additional information. On this one, the applicant has submitted the wrong plans, so it's his mistake, not ours. Am I correct? Yeah.
We have consulted the Environment Agency, but to be honest, rather late in the day, but they have not responded because it's in flood zone 3 and the fact that the applicant is relying on evidence of some years. I think the expedient thing to do would be to defer this item.
Okay, so I've proposed it. I have a seconder. I'm going to go to the vote. Okay. So this is a vote for deferral. That's unanimous. Hello. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's deferred. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Oh, you're saying, sorry, I thought you had your hand up there. Sorry. Okay, moving on then. Again, to George.
Thank you, Chairman.
I feel like this is Groundhog Day a little bit, Deirdre. Yeah.
Thank
okay,
you,
I'll move
Chairman.
the officer.
This is the third application for the same site. This is a retrospective application for the installation of an in-post locker on the southern elevation of the building. The application site is in the setting of several listed buildings and the Yorden Conservation Area. The application building itself, as discussed earlier, is a non-designated heritage asset. Officers consider that the materials used on the structure, including its bright color, size, form, location, stands out as an incongruous addition to the site. It serves to diminish and detract from the traditional character and appearance of and heritage significance of the non-designated heritage assets, and then the Yorden Conservation Area. It is also not ancillary to the main function of the building. The officer recommendation, therefore, is to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to the ward member first quickly. So, Councillor Summergill.
Are we looking at this refusal purely because it was called in by the parish council? Because, or are we being asked to submit to a refusal rather than looking at an approval?
I think as per the papers, we're looking to refuse the application. It's retrospective. Yes.
Is before members because it was called in by Yorden Parish Council. They requested that they would prefer the application to be dealt with by members. Our recommendation obviously is for refusal, but the only reason why the application is before members is because of the request by Yorden Parish Council.
Okay, all good. Thank you. Councillor Clayton and Councillor Harwood.
I'll move we refuse.
Councillor Harwood.
The NPPF states that you should not just refuse an application, you should negotiate a better layout or outcome. I just want to be reassured that we have had those discussions about putting it around the back or around the side or whatever, and we don't lose the appeal. So can I just have some satisfaction from the officers that due process has been followed, because this site is the bane of this committee's life, and I don't want. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. We have had discussions with the applicant, and the applicant initially considered relocating the in-post locker to a different part of the site. We asked him then to send us a formal request to withdraw the application, but that request never came in. We actually called him a few times today just to confirm that he actually wanted the application withdrawn so that he can relocate to a better location at the site. But then we haven't received any response, and that is why the application is before you this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Does that answer your question,
And-
Councillor Howard?
Well, it answers my question if we've got that on the file note in writing. So if there's an appeal, we've actually got that evidence to back up our refusal. Yeah. Okay. In
All
that case, if I'm happy to second refusal.
Okay. I'm going to just go to the vote on this one. So this is voting for refusal. All in favour? Okay, that is refused. Okay, thank you. Damn it. Okay, councillors. Councillors, if we can move on, please. Okay, so item 4 is a started item, but I have been indicated that Councillor Harwood wishes to speak on this. So I will move to you to introduce, please, and the urgent update to go with it.
Thank you, Chairman. So I trust you've all seen the published urgent update for this application. So this application site relates to the motorway service station at junction 8 of the M20. And this application is to reconfigure the existing parking area behind the main building, to build a modest shower block extension, and to create a 51 space HGV parking area on either side of the internal access road that runs along the southwestern boundary. For the purposes of the local plan review, the site is within the countryside and within the setting of the Kent Downs National Landscape. So this aerial of the site, this is just a sort of sweeping view of the existing parking area to be reconfigured. This is the internal access road where the parking is going to go either side. Existing layout. That just shows the modest extension to the building. And this is the layout with the additional HGV parking there and there. And the landscaping plan here that shows, again, the parking in the context of the existing woodland to be retained, with the area in the northwest corner and this area on the northern boundary to be enhanced, as well as the existing woodland within the area. As the submission sets out, recent surveys published to the Development for Transport have identified a national shortage of safe and secure HGV parking across the UK. Further to this, the government recognises the need for the expansion of existing facilities on or near to strategic road networks, and the Transport for South East Lorry Parking Survey identifies a shortage of an estimated 1,528 HGV parking spaces across their area, with Kent identified as a hotspot. A recent National Highways lorry parking demand assessments also identified Maidstone Borough is experiencing high lorry parking issues, and this is supported by the findings of a parking beat survey for the site, which demonstrated existing HGV parking is operating at an occupancy rate of 155% at its peak. With all this considered, it is evident that there is a need for more suitable HGV parking in the borough, and it is reasonable to have such provision at existing motorway service stations. As set out in the committee report, whilst the submission would see the loss of a number of trees, the council's landscape officer has not raised an objection to this, and the submission does show a good level of new native planting to compensate for the loss of this existing landscaping. It should also be made clear that the development will retain and enhance part of the existing woodland buffer between the service station and the M20, and that the development will be well contained and largely screened from public view outside of the service station. This view is backed up by the conclusions of the submitted LVIA, and as the committee report concludes, the development will not affect the setting of the Kent Downs national landscape, and it will not cause significant harm to the character and appearance of the countryside. The application is also considered to be acceptable in all other respects, including in highway safety terms, and strong weight is given to national highways, offering no objection and confirming that should the local authority choose to refuse the application, it will be necessary to consult the Secretary of State for Transport beforehand. On this basis, a recommendation of approval is made, subject to the completion of the legal agreement and the recommended conditions as set out in the committee report and subject to the published urgent update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Miss Reaney for the applicant, please.
Is it working? Yeah, perfect. Good evening, councillors. My name is Rachel Reaney, and I am speaking on behalf of the applicant, Roadchef, who are also in attendance today. Firstly, we want to thank officers for working with the design team on Roadchef's aspirations to deliver an additional 51 HGV parking spaces alongside the reconfiguration of the existing HGV parking area and security measures in the form of CCTV cameras, lighting and new fencing at their existing motorway service station at Maidstone. Importantly, the proposal seeks to support the safety and well-being of travellers on the M20, which is an important route for long-distance drivers and hauliers connecting to Europe. The need for development is backed, as outlined by your planning officers, by recent government-commissioned reports that have identified a shortfall of 1,528 overnight HGV parking spaces within the South East region. Within the borough of Maidstone, in particular, experiencing high lorry parking issues, and this was outlined on National Highways consultation response. A Park and Beat survey demonstrates that the service station is operating at critical levels of capacity, with an occupancy rate of 155% at its peak. As a consequence, HGV drivers are parking in inappropriate locations within the site, attracting issues of antisocial behaviour and crime. On this point, we note that the new NPPF published today again reinforces the need for decisions to recognise the importance of providing adequate overnight lorry parking facilities, taking into account any local shortages to reduce the risks of parking in inappropriate locations. As recognised by your planning officers and recommending approval of this application, the proposal will provide those safe and secure parking areas for rest where there is a critical need. The proposal is policy compliant and will support the sustainable growth and expansion of an existing business, which supports the strategic road of the M20. Proposals also include a small extension for the amenity building to allow improved shower facilities. This will enhance the experience for hard-working HGV drivers who deserve respite and comfort during long-haul drives. To facilitate development, the proposal will see the loss of low-category trees on the southern boundary of the site. However, the landscape officer has no objection because we will be retaining a strong landscape buffer to ensure no impact on the surrounding area. A strong ecological strategy is endorsed by your council's ecology officer, which seeks to deliver 10% biodiversity net gain within the actual site. Importantly, the proposal has been informed through active engagement with Hollingbourne Parish Council. The Roadchef team have addressed concerns raised on the need for security measures, alongside mitigation in the form of an acoustic fence and a strong landscape ecology strategy. This will minimise the impact of noise and light pollution.
Can I ask you to wrap up, please?
Okay, no problem. All of the matters have been addressed, and the Road Haulage Association endorses this application. This application will also have the backing of government funding and is essential and will be delivered in the year 2025 to 26. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ring. Councillor Cox, this is your area, I believe.
Yes, motorway service stations. For anybody who's come to this site, it's not a big motorway service station. It currently has capacity, I think, for about 55 HGVs. This will be doubling the site. But what really brings it home to me is if you go down the motorway junction, just 1.5 junctions they're very close together. There's the Sevington facility, which is 660 HGVs. It's a £34 million facility. The drivers who go there can have their own pods with their own shower, with their own toilet, with their own bed. It's just on a different scale. And we talk about here improved security. That is from a really low base, I'm afraid. So when you look at the map here, we've got the railway line, that's actually sunk. Okay, it's actually tunneled underneath. What you actually have on the north of the site here is a footpath, and right next to the footpath is the national landscape. The significance of that footpath is if you try and walk it today, and I don't know if our landscape officers have, but if not, I invite them to come with me and I'll show them. You cannot walk up there because of human excrement. If you're really unlucky, you'll see people in the inaction of it. It is disgusting. Now, I only raise it because and I mean the Parish Council, Hollingbourne Parish Council, I'm not on that, but I attend the meetings, have reported the sort of like the bad situation there to Road Chef on numerous occasions, like 12 and upwards, and nothing has been done. The fences are broken down. It's just a mess. So I'm really worried about this facility. The other thing I'd say is when you go to Sevington, the reason that site succeeds is because it's near an inland border facility. And there was a recent article in the Kent Messenger where the proprietors there acknowledged there needed to be more capacity for HGV drivers. But one of the things they accredited the success of their site is it's next to an IBF. And a new IBF has just been approved down near Dover, and they were purporting that is the natural place for such a site. I've got 2 more points. First, the one is that the Sevington, I mentioned about it being at different scale. I actually went online last night to try and book a place at Sevington, and their app is fantastic. You know, it sort of tells you if there's availability, if there's not availability, what facilities you're going to get. It's 5-star rated. The Road Chef app for booking, you can't book. You just get a little discount on your cost of parking, and it's 1-star rated. So I think we're talking chalk and cheese. The final thing I wanted to mention is it's at Junction 8, as we know. Well, Junction 8 is the start of Operation Brock. And for anybody who's ever had the pleasure when the M20 is closed, you come off the motorway, and if you're a lorry, you cannot go back on the motorway at Junction 8. You have to go back round the roundabout, head back up to Junction 7 or Junction 6, and come back down again. What happens is they don't, okay? They'll go down the A20, which obviously is not permitted. But the idea of actually encouraging more people to come and park overnight somewhere that's not designed for lorries when Brock is on, which is probably about 15, 20 weeks of the year, is just madness to my point of view. So there you go. Oh, and no, I talked about national landscape. Thank you.
Mr. Jarman, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I do take Councillor Cox's point about the cleanliness and hygiene. I was there this afternoon. But I think that is different to the planning application before us. I suggest that we write as a committee to the landowner and franchisee stating what you set out, Councillor Cox.
We'll come back. Go.
I didn't really emphasise a point I should make. I just want to remind the committee that as it is a national landscape, we've got an active duty to protect and enhance. And whatever we do there, it's an active duty, not a passive duty.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the ward councillors' context is really important. I don't know if there's any others, but I well remember when the Hollingbourne services came to this committee initially, and we were effectively told it's we have to rubber stamp it. It's the Department of Transport kind of railroading it through, and that's it. There's nothing we can do about it. But the one thing that we did do, because then it wasn't a national landscape, it was an AONB, and it was adjacent to semi-natural ancient Snarkhurst Wood, was we demanded decent landscaping around it to try and screen the thing because it is grim. And now we have an application further eroding the landscaping when already there's all sorts of additional things have gone in there, and they're all eating into the landscaping on what is a constrained site. And I think the Sevington point is a really good one around a custom built facility, which is absolutely huge compared to this site that's shoehorned in to, and it's basically a non-conforming site for all the, I mean, I think I'd probably go further than colleagues have. I was up there Sunday afternoon wandering about in the lorry park and the area, and it was, I was tripping over rodenticide hoppers next to an ancient woodland, and as you say, people urinate. It was just a hellscape. It was just so grim, and to think of our consolidating that within a national landscape next to an ancient woodland. Oh, I understand. Again, we are very constrained, but it goes against the grain. However, on something where we can influence potentially is in terms of the mitigation. And I am troubled by the fact that, perhaps the most decent habitat is going to be ruined by having trees planted all over it. I don't get it. I mean, there's a massive great woodland, ancient woodland, and then next to it, the one area of open habitat of grassland and scrub, which provides a nice mosaic of habitats and an open sunny area that's so important for reptiles and for invertebrates and so on. And there's a plan here to plant trees all over it, so we'll make it into secondary woodland and shady habitat. So therefore, the protected species protected under Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act will have no habitat. And I just don't get it how we're told that, oh, well, if you don't do that and you do something, like put a pond into it or keep it open, you lose BNG points. Well, I just don't understand how you can destroy a habitat with a habitat that's not as good, and then you can't keep a decent habitat because you'll get less BNG points. It just shows what a lunatic tick box system we've currently got. And I don't really understand, to be fair, but I think all we can do is perhaps ask for the landscape team to work with the applicant to ensure that when these trees are planted on the decent area of habitat, that it's done in a way that creates clearings and rides so that we don't lose the protected species, which it's got two pieces of legislation. You've got the 1981 Wildlife and Countryside Act crashing up against biodiversity net gain of trying to do stuff that doesn't need doing. And what are you going to do? Remove the vegetation that's already there, like the goat willows and the, you're already going to shade out the herbs, the nice plants that are growing there. I just don't understand it. And I'd like the officers to come back just to explain the point in the urgent update as to this scoring system and why you don't take more notice of what's there already before you do the kind of creative habitat creation on top of a habitat.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harwood. Before I go through other councillors, there's a fair few questions there that I think we need answered. So, to go to the officer, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to be clear. The site is not within the national landscape. It's within the setting. And as the LVIA concludes and is agreed with, the development does not cause any harm to that setting. I think with the urgent update, it's just to be clear that the points raised by Councillor Harwood were made only a couple of days ago, and I think the point I'm trying to make is that it's not. I don't know if the suggestions made would affect the B&G rating.
So you're saying that if we left the area, as Councillor Harwood's kind of alluding to, as it is now, that the B&G would be affected or wouldn't be affected? Sorry.
I don't know the answer. That's the thing. That area is it's a large area, and B&G focuses on that area a lot, and there was no time to make sure that the B&G wasn't affected as a result of the suggestions made.
Okay, and just to clarify for other members, obviously the B&G legislation states it's meant to be a like-for-like replacement, isn't it, to go with it, which hints at the treating. But we do take your points on, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Round was next.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the points I wanted to make have already been made. But having said that, I will go further. I mean, we're dealing here as a planning committee for Maidstone, and indeed we need to concentrate on Maidstone's issues. But the reality is lorry parking nationally is an absolute chaos. It is everywhere. But the fact is that Maidstone's halfway between the M25 and the Channel Ports, and that's why we suffer. And anything you do 10 and 20 miles up and down from Maidstone's not going to actually have that much drastic effect, because quite frankly, you go to every motorway service station, M2, M20, M25, M3, M4, the whole lot of them are all in quite frankly, a horrible state. Unfortunately, I spend too much time driving at night, stopping in these motorway service stations, and they're all pretty dire. They're all a bit of a mess, and they're all, frankly, an embarrassment. And I feel greatly sorry for most of these lorry drivers that have to use them. And they have to get on with their job, and we're not going to stop them driving goods up and down this country. So maybe there's a job for our own full council and cabinet to consider the knock-on effects of what we do or don't do just because we've got one motorway service station to concern us. There is a much bigger picture to consider here. But the other bigger picture, of course, is that my ward is only half a mile from this place. And one only sees in my ward the amount of people that actually try and avoid the M20 between Ashford and Maidstone and use all the country roads and use all the lay-bys and anywhere else they can park and defecate in every single part of those roads. And there's various other nefarious activities that take place between those lorries and those various parks. So I recognise that Roadchef are trying to address the situation in a very small way. It's a much bigger problem than what this will deliver. I, for one, support Councillor Harwood's proposals. I really do think that we really should consider the natural habitats a darn sight better, but then at the end of the day, I'd love to see a few hornbeams or something else in the area. But the reality is that we need to take this in a very much bigger context, not in this committee. But perhaps I can pass this over to our cabinet members here to say that we really need to do something a bit bigger and better nationally on this front. On the basis of Councillor Harwood's recommendations, I will have to approve it.
And Councillor Round, are you moving to proposals on the papers then? Sorry.
Yeah, for clarity, I think what I was trying to say, and it's really been helped by the case officer, is that we have no choice but to approve for all the reasons set out by officers. However, I think on that apex site between the railway and the motorway at the western extent of the site, I think we perhaps should give delegated powers to officers to have the discussion, look at the scoring and accommodate the wildlife that we've already got there in terms of the more open habitats that's required, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater by covering the whole thing in trees. So if officers get that, we need some open habitats retained. Okay, thank you.
could I just be absolutely clear on what area we're talking about? Thanks.
Okay, Councillor, sorry, Councillor Springett.
Thank you. Lost my train of thought. Could we actually, as an alternative of planting trees on site, could they make a contribution to an off-site planting of trees? Just to throwing that one out there. That's an opportunity rather than plant on that. Could they not make a contribution to planting elsewhere? But that's a thought. Right, this development, crime and grime. Grime is what I'm hearing about. I'm very well aware of the crime reports that consistently come from this site. Cars are broken into, lorries are broken into. Now that feeds in to the Hollingbourne comments about broken fences, fences that aren't repaired. And actually, I would make an appeal to Ms. Reaney, please. We're going to write, but would you please take back? Thank you very much. Okay, that's fine. I was going to say, are there
Sorry,
toilets
members,
in the
I know
shower block?
It's
I'd
a
just like
two-way
to-
conversation.
Yeah, sorry, are there toilets at the shower block? Do we know? Is it just a shower block or are there toilets there? Do we know? There are toilets. Okay. So condition 16 says the development hereby approved should be carried out in accordance with the hard boundary treatments as shown in the submitted plans details with metal mesh security fencing being only dark green in colour. And then it says the development hereby permitted shall be maintained. I would like it to say the development and fencing hereby shall be maintained as such. So we would like them to keep the fencing secure. And actually, can we do anything with an informative to say, will you please repair and maintain in good repair existing fencing around the site to assist with this horrible situation that seems to be going on along the North Downs Way or the public footpath? Just a thought there. I'm really not going to refuse it, but could we put an informative on and could we just change that to make sure the fencing is, and that might just help a bit with security. You never know. Thank you.
There's nothing wrong with us doing it's informative. So as long as the proposer and the seconder are happy to take that. Okay. Yeah, we can do it as informative as long as the seconder and the proposer are happy to take that. Next, I've got Councillor Cleater, then Cox, then Summersgill, and then we'll go to the vote. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Round picked up on many of the issue, which is this is a national problem. And when the Highways Agency or wherever they're calling themselves this week decide to build roads, motorways or whatever, they should maybe pop over to Germany and Holland and see what they do, because they don't go for the big areas. You have smaller areas with showers and toilets, so you don't get that propensity of concentration. And the other thing I would say is some of these lorry drivers don't have a choice where they stop, because if you're stuck on the M25 and that clock is ticking on your tacho, you pull over or they're committing an offence. And this is where, in this country, it causes a major problem. You've only got to go to the running horse roundabouts and they're always parked on the bridges and that, because the tacho says they've got to stop. And the other issue is a lot of companies, multinational, will use cheaper labour from Eastern Europe, and they don't have the money to pay for the facilities that are on offer. So this is a national problem that the small bit of it has arrived in Maidstone. I know the M20 Junction 8 hasn't got a great reputation. There have been a number of reports in the papers about drivers being charged by false security guards, etc., taking money off them. But having said that, with the relevant recommendations, I think we're going to have to approve it from a planning side. But I think we need to, as a council, liaise with our KCC colleagues and Highways England and the government to say, you know what, we need to do something about this, because up and down the M20, the M25 and the M2, local authorities are going to be facing the same problems that we've got here. So I think we're going to have to go with it, with the recommendation, but I think it's a sticking plaster on a major problem.
Thank you, Councillor Fleeter. Councillor Cox.
I want to come back to what Kate said about the national landscape. I think it's in the the border of the national landscape is where the fence is. I've got our map here. This is Maidstone's map that clearly shows that. I know this footpath. I know exactly how close you are to the area that forms part of Road Chef. It is on the boundary. And when we're talking about sites such as Heathlands, and where the AONB unit is demanding there's a 300 buffer meter between the landscape and any development, how can we look at this when it's only 3 feet, if that? I think we might have our definition wrong on that. And for that reason, I don't think we should be approving it today. I think we should be clarifying that through a deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Somerville.
Yeah, mine's a completely different one. The transport statement concludes swept path analysis demonstrates vehicles are able to appropriately access depart HGV spaces forwards. When you look at the plan, there's a whole rack of parallel parking, which to me suggests you have to reverse into it. There's just a whole row of them. If you then look at the visual, the Google Earth one, you can see the route of HGVs coming into the site, and there's 7 of them on that, queued up on that parking area, waiting to access the current HGV area. Now, if they're all going to queue up already and they have to reverse into their remaining parking spaces, I just can't see that it's not going to back up right up to the junction and screw up the roundabout. I don't see that is, as stated, appropriately accessing and departing HGV spaces forwards. It's not. You'd have to back into those bays.
Okay, thank you. Yep, to be honest, it's on the plan. You're completely correct. Let's go to the officer.
So on the screen at the moment is the proposals map. The green triangles is the national landscape, and the HGV parking is here. So right, yeah. Let's try again. Yep, so this is the service station. The boundary to the national landscape is here, heading north, and this is where the proposed HGV parking is. So it's accepted it's within the setting, but as the report sets out, it doesn't cause any harm to the setting of the national landscape. And I think with the HGV parking, so there's no highways objection, and the lorries will either drive forward into the spaces and reverse out, but this is all within the internal system, and swept paths have been submitted to show that vehicles can do that, lorries can do that.
Sorry, no, the traffic comes in and have to reverse into it. It's not.
I think they are going to have to reverse, but I think what the officer's saying is there's space from the past. Yes.
Sorry.
And while they're carrying out reverse, there's space for them to still pass.
Yes, once in the space, vehicles can move past. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Cox, and then I think we're going to wrap it up.
Thank you. If we can just go back, please, on the one that shows the map with the landscape, etc. This one here, thank you. You can see very clearly on here the roadway, right? They come in from the roundabout and they'll take this one-way system round to the left, and then they're going round the top. The road round the top, as I say, is meters away from the national landscape. The issue is that we're more than doubling the capacity of lorries that are going to do that. And when you add that, I would add to what Councillor Summergill said, about actually that you're going to have more blockage because you're having to wait for lorries to reverse into these new spots. There's going to be such a sort of movement of traffic going on. I don't see how that will not affect the national landscape and particularly people's right to enjoyment of those public footpaths when they're cleaned up.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I see actually you've got Mr. Russell indicating to talk as well. Do you want to come?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. My question is not actually in relation to the debate here. I'm just looking for a little bit more flexibility on the recommendation with regards to the BNG condition and the Section 106. So if we can just give officers some flexibility to allow us to either go more condition and collect and maybe less on the Section 106 or vice versa.
Sorry, Russell, can you just clarify that? I think a few of us a bit, we're at the BNG side of it, but the Section 106?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the recommendation, Chair. I think I just wanted to come in after the debate had finished, which I think it has, because I think you're about to move to the vote. I'm just looking at the recommendation, which is talking about the. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull it up here. It says to secure the on-site biodiversity habitat net gain of at least 10% for the 30 years, including monies to cover the cost of basically the reviewing the reports. Now, sometimes the condition itself deals and secures the on-site biodiversity on its own, and we are simply collecting the monitoring fee under the Section 106. Well, the way this is drafted is we have to do both. I would just like flexibility so that we can go one or the other. We still have to collect the monitoring fee under the Section 106. I appreciate that. I'm just looking for some more flexibility as to whether or not we secure the 30 years under an obligation as opposed to the condition.
Okay, thank you, Russell.
Yes, sorry. All Russell's saying is the only option, if you want to approve this application, to collect monies is via a Section 106, and the monies are needed for the BNG monitoring fee. But the 30-year plus management plan can be dealt with by condition.
Okay, you clear on that? So I have a proposer, I have a seconder. That's with the giving the officers delegated authority to work about the landscape and the BNG, and the, as Russell just pointed out, the flexibility. Yep. And then an informative about repairing and improving. I think actually that's got highlight as well about improving the fencing because it may not be adequate, but that's an informative, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So the 106 will just cover the monies for the BNG monitoring.
Okay. All members clear? And with the urgent update. Okay. Okay. Those in favour? Okay, it's 10-4. Those against? 1 against. Those abstaining? 2 abstain. That is passed and approved. Thank you, councillors. Okay, to move on quickly, next item is a starred item. Does anyone wish to see us introduced?
Could I just ask for clarification on the votes? I think that a councillor on the other side might have just been counted twice. Can I just check that officers did indeed do the arithmetic correctly? Thank you.
Sorry, Gaz Wilson, you see, didn't vote? Did vote?
Yeah, I voted in favour. Yeah, whether I left my hand up too long is another thing. I don't know.
We've got to put something.
Yeah, my record. Oh, can you hear me? My record of the voting was 10 in favour, 1 against, and 2 abstentions.
Yeah, that's all good. Okay, back to the next item then. Starred item. Does anyone wish to see us introduced? No. Do we have any urgent updates on this, just to double check? No. Okay, so I'm going to propose this from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Does the applicant wish to speak? Do you waive your right? Okay, that may not be the applicant. Pardon? No. No, but the lady there is. No. So do you still wish to talk, or you have to wave your? Not yet. Okay. Okay. If you speak, we need to introduce it. We're just going to basically it's a start item for approval. Yes. Yes. So yeah. Okay. So basically, we're going to approve it. Yep. So you wave your right, and then we just go straight to the vote. Okay. Those in favour? Oh, I've moved it. Do that. Sorry, and Councillor Harwood seconded it. Okay, that's unanimous. It was, so yeah, it was. 13. Okay. Hopefully we've had a bit of a debate and a bit of stuff going on. I'm going to just propose we have a quick 5-minute break for personal break, and people can stretch their legs. No chocolate. So could I ask councillors to be back in at 8 o'clock? Okay, councillors, can you take your seats, please? Okay, councillors, so the next item, land north of Old Ashford Road, Lenham, Kent. This can also be a starred item, as long as we acknowledge the urgent update that's been submitted, unless anybody wishes to see this introduced.
I know, I don't want it to be introduced. I just want to make a comment as
I
we're all.
think, sorry,
You can't go
Councillor
into
Springett,
this.
I think
Okay.
if you want to comment on it, we need to introduce it. So.
So this report back from an application that's been to committee in September and October. No. I don't know why it's not showing. My apologies. Back down. Yes, this is a report back from the application that came to committee in September and October. We're specifically referring to the landscape buffer on the northern boundary of the site. One of the in the recommendation was ahead of term that that landscape buffer be subject to a bond that would ensure it was maintained for 30 years. In case there was an issue with it, and the money would then be used to rectify any deficiencies in that buffer. Just go into detail. This is the photographs of that existing tree line from the A20. And the line is this row of 2 lines of hedgerow and some trees along that boundary. The applicant has advised that they've been unable to secure from an insurance company a bond that would last for 30 years to cover the management. And they've also said they would not be able to sort of put down any deposit that would last for that period of time because of the way their business operations work. So the compromise, as in the recommendation papers, is that they put down £10,000 and subject to the landscape buffer being implemented and growing as you would expect, and all of the established plants and trees healthy after 5 years, that money would then be repaid. So there is a sort of potential drawdown of that money if they were to fail to meet that obligation. So the recommendation is to vary the head of term as offered by the applicant, and we're happy that that's acceptable compromise. It covers the riskier period when you're trying to plant the buffer in terms of establishing new trees and hedgerow plants. Just to go back to the urgent update that was circulated in your papers today, Lenham Parish Council have responded. They've raised some issues as detailed. Effectively, they obviously highlight the point that this landscape buffer has a very important function in terms of the national landscape. They are concerned about it being subsumed into people's gardens and concerned about potential fences going on the line. They're also concerned that they feel that biodiversity net gain should still be applied to this site.
and they're also mentioning the reference to archaeology on the site overall. As I've responded to that in the urgent update papers, the landscape buffer is outside of private gardens. It would go to be looked after once established by a management company, as obviously is very typical with communal areas. Boundary treatments haven't been approved yet, but it would be envisaged to be a close wall fence inside the line of the buffer, back on people's gardens, not on the edge of the road. The issue of biodiversity net gain has already been discussed in detail in the previous reports. It doesn't apply nationally to this site because of its reserve matters. And because the reserve matters do not include layout, we have not considered the biodiversity net gain can be reasonably applied to this site. The final point raised, and also some local archaeology groups have raised this with us on this particular site, is a separate issue on archaeology. And as I've outlined in my response to the in the urgent update, archaeology was fully dealt with back in 2019. All of the site had trial trenches on them. There were a total of 30 on the phase 2 site. And that was all agreed and signed off by the KCC archaeological officer. So there's no opportunity to revisit that issue 5 years later. It's all been dealt with and there's no control that we can impose on archaeology. So the recommendation is to amend the head of term as per the papers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cox, it's all in your ward this week, isn't it?
It is, yeah, my lucky week, okay, Christmas presents. Yeah, so I just got a couple of queries. So on the bond, they couldn't get a 30-year. Did they say how long they could get? Because I imagine our colleagues who asked for a bond are experienced, they would know they existed. And so what period is available? And the reason I ask that is £10,000 is nothing, you know, for a 30-year period. So I would get more assurance from there being a bond, even if it's for a 15-year or a 20-year, than just £10,000. Thank you.
Councillor Springett, then Councillor Summergill.
Thank you. I think this bond idea is interesting, actually, and I do think the borough has got to pay a little bit more attention to when management companies come in to maintain things. So I'm pleased that there is a bond. That Lenham have said they're concerned that the landscape buffer will erode if residents remove planting. Well, I have a situation behind me where it is alleged that a resident broke or cut 3 trees in the landscape buffer because he doesn't like trees. So a neighbour has gone to the developer who said, oh, no, it's not our job, Gov, it's down to the maintenance company now, the management company. The management company said, oh, we haven't got the money in the pot for that, to replace 3 big trees. So we've already got them fighting. This is only 2 years down the road. Thankfully, it's covered by conditions, so we will get it sorted. But I'd just like to flag up with the borough, I think we need to be very careful. And I like the idea of a bond, and I think where we have got maintenance landscape buffers around developments, we need to consider having that more often. So that's the first one. And secondly, page 57 at the top, this is in the heads of terms. So we've got water saving measures of 110 litres per person per day. I get that. And we're then proposing a covenant that is totally unenforceable. Covenant in the transfer of the relevant dwellings, which requires the owners or occupiers to retain the water saving measures in perpetuity. How on earth, unless you go and inspect someone's house, are you going to enforce that? How would you even know? And how do you know the personal circumstances of the family living there aren't inconvenienced with health reasons through some of the water saving measures? These showers that pump air through, not water, may not be suitable for everybody. Toilets that don't flush properly. You know, we're stopping people from taking out things that sound like they're not working. They wouldn't take them out if they were working properly. So I'm really concerned that in the heads of terms there's a covenant. We're told we can't put a condition on that is unenforceable, and we have a covenant that is unenforceable. I just think that's ridiculous. So that's just a comment. I'm not going to, you know, I'm happy with it otherwise, but I just wanted to flag up we need to be careful with management of buffer zones. Thank you.
Councillor Summergill.
Yeah, I just wanted to check if £10,000 enough if nothing's happened for 5 years and everything's died. Would £10,000 actually replace what they're putting in now? And who's paying for the independent landscape architect to do the work? Is that coming out the 10,000, or are they paying for it, or are we having to pay for it?
Okay, Councillor Harwood, and then I'll come back to the officer. Sorry, Mary.
Thank you, Chairman. And this comes on to landscape management companies as well, because basically they, frankly, they've destroyed most of the landscaping and all of the schemes in my patch. They've either ring barked the trees, or they have crown-shaped trees, which are supposed to be big as foils to the big buildings, and they keep them at a height they can always maintain them by hand. So we've got these like bonsai trees pruned to nothing, and hedgerows which are Lilliputian. What I cannot see here is any reference to a landscape and ecological management plan or LEMP or anything, which actually sets out that the trees will need to be maintained, at what height, whether they grow to their natural height, whether the hedge will be maintained at 2 feet, or like the decent hedges along the A20, they're about kind of 10 feet or more. So I am really concerned that we will end up with the cheapest possible to manage approach, which is not going to screen the national landscape very well. So can I just perhaps do we need to give perhaps delegated powers to discuss with the landscape officers the conditions we need to apply to the future maintenance of the trees and hedgerow, because we know we're paying for it, but we might be paying for whacking it down to nothing when actually we want to screen the houses. So it's going to have to be maintained at quite a height.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Good points as always. Mary.
Yes, in terms of the bond, what I was advised was they couldn't actually get any surety company to cover that issue because of risk, because the level of risk was something they just didn't feel they could cover. So it was the actual principle of the bond, as opposed to, in addition to the period of time. In terms of the cutting off the trees, obviously there will still be a management plan. There will still be an obligation that be a 30-year management plan, and that is where the enforceability will come in. I mean, obviously we can't legislate people's behaviour if they want to, cut down trees, but there will be an enforcement route available to us in the normal way, notwithstanding the absence of the bond. Yes, the water saving measure, the way the regulations work is there is a contingency of that of about 9%. You can basically go to 120 litres, and that's what's factored into the equation. Now, the approach we're taking is if we put that obligation on the individual householder, each one has that obligation. The benefit of that over a planning condition is if one person breaches a planning condition, the whole condition falls away as unenforceable. So although it's not perfect, this individual covenant per household is stronger overall than a single condition that covers 102 houses, if that makes sense.
But you still can't enforce it unless you go around and inspect everybody's house. So why do we put it on? Because unless you're going to go into people's houses and inspect them, I just think it's a pointless covenant.
So, Mary, just on that, when they go to sell the house, the solicitors should look into that covenant, and if it hasn't got that condition on it, then it's very hard to sell because you've broken the covenant, as certain people have found out when they have broken those covenants.
Yeah, it's a standard thing we have to impose, but this is trying to find the best way and making sure it's not as breached as it could be. We're just having to sort of work with the way the legislation is phrased to us in that regard. In terms of the £10,000, obviously that's just a figure that's been put in terms of the offer. We haven't actually costed up what it would cost to sort of, if the whole thing failed, and what it would cost. Is just a case that's enough we consider to deal with potential failure from some of the trees not managing to establish as well as they could. That's the amount that's been offered in terms of the bond, and obviously it's more than you would normally get on a landscaping scheme. This is a new approach we're taking, and ordinarily there wouldn't be any money put down or this 5-year review at all. So it is some progress towards trying to cover this issue. The independent landscape architect would be paid for by the developer. They would be the people that would employ somebody to certify that the works have carried out. So that wouldn't come out of the 10,000. It wouldn't be the council's responsibility. Regarding the management plan, the requirement for the management plan is in one of the heads of terms. So it's still a document that needs to be given to us and for us to approve. So in terms of how the hedgerow is maintained, the height it's maintained, and the height the trees are maintained is obviously still there to be determined, because when we get the management plan, those are the sort of things we'll be looking into it and making sure they are acceptable before we sign it off. So it's not a case that issue is finished yet. There's another stage. They do the woodland buffer management plan. We make sure it's in accordance with our expectations, to make sure it is a thick buffer with longevity to give us the landscape screening that we're trying to achieve here. I think that was all the questions.
Okay, thank you, Marion. You want to come in, Mr. Drummond?
Yeah, thanks. Just looking at this sort of strategically, but also from a strict sort of planning lens as well, or decision-making lens. As we all know, there are problems with management companies. Just pick up National Design Guide advice now. There's an awful lot on there about stewardship. Sometimes people call it legacy. So it's definitely the remit of planning to explore mechanisms like bonds, perhaps sort of joint control of managed spaces, with perhaps a dowry paid to the council for sort of step-in rights if a management company fails, and often they do, or there's quite a lengthy hiatus. However, the elephant in the room is, why didn't we put this on as Section 106 agreement when we first approved the outline planning application? That's when it should have happened. And the reason why we haven't asked for, if I can be straightforward about it, add-ons in the past is because the applicant has said you shouldn't be doing that on the back of reserved matter applications. And that has, our own legal services have agreed with that. So I think there's, probably it's a discussion point with a cabinet member, the chair and vice chair of planning committee. And I think there's a direct parallel with the first application we discussed on the George. We should be having, up-to-date, on-point heads of terms on the back of the Section 106, on the back of the original outline permission.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Cleater.
Thank you. So the independent landscape assessor is going to be paid for by the applicant. Well, the independent assessor assessed all that lovely cladding is okay at Grenfell. It's marking your own homework. So I do have concerns around that. But the issue about the affordability of the 10K, I'm just sitting here going, why is that our problem? We've said this is what we would like and what we feel is, because 10K to me is a loss leader. They're paying that and they can afford to lose that. And if it all goes wrong, then fine, we're only 10K out and the council will be left with the complaints and everything. So, they've put in for this. We've said this is what we would like. And they've turned around and said, we can't afford it. and we've backed down and said, oh, okay, you know, you can afford 10K. I think we should have haggled a bit more, to be quite honest. But that's just my opinion on that. We seem to, you know, if someone's putting in a planning application for whatever, wherever, and we say, these are the things that we require as a local authority, then they're the things we require. You know, and as I say, 10K to me is a loss leader. They'll quite happily pay that or whatever happens, and we're probably going to be left to pick up any issues around that. So that's my only comment on that is, you know, the independent landscape assessor, and are they going to put all that work in maintaining all of that planting? Because to be quite honest, if I was them, I'd say, yeah, I can afford to lose 10K.
So Councillor, the area still goes into the LEMP eventually. So it's still be managed underneath the LEMP. The 10K is solely put aside just for that buffer. If a section of them fell, those who planted trees on this committee, I've planted thousands, and generally 2/3 to a third do normally fail, because that's when you plant whips and that kind of stuff, that generally happens. So that this is what this is to cover, and whips, as we know, are quite cheap. I know 10K seems quite a small amount, and obviously in 5-10 years time it will be a smaller amount because of inflation. But I do believe we asked the bond to be at that figure as well initially. So them coming back and saying, here's 10K to put in your coffers and hold on to until it does fail. Yes. Yeah. Or if it does fail, it could survive. So at the end of those 10 years, we'll give the 10K back after actually having that 10K for time, rather than it sitting in the bond somewhere. So I actually think at least it's there.
I very much agree with your sentiment, Councillor Cleater, but I don't actually think this is playing hardball. But if we sort of like get anywhere near playing hardball, we need to do it from day one. It has to be on the outline planning permission, not on the back of reserved matters, which basically we've said are okay.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Anyone indicating to debate? So no one's proposed, so I will propose from the chair with the urgent update. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Summerkill. Okay, so all in favour? Okay. Those against? That's yours, shouldn't it? So, okay, that is approved. Okay, moving on then. Okay, so 82 Buckland Road, Maidstone, Kent. So, TPO application. I'll move to the officer to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman. This is first of three applications coming to this committee tonight. The first one I'm going to be introducing. The next two, my colleague Lewis here is going to be introducing. So the first one is 82 Buckland Road. This application has been submitted by Councillor Jeffrey. It is for the pruning of 2 thuya trees within his property to the northern boundary, one to the front of the property along the north, and as you can see in the plan here, a second tree, T6, just sort of to the side of the property near the rear garden. First one, T5, is this one. Let's make the screen bigger, it'd be a bit better. So this tree here is situated kind of to the side of the driveway. It's got quite a wide crown. The works proposed to this tree is to reduce the size of the crown and lift the crown over the driveway. Let's make this bigger. Excuse me. Okay. It's better. Sorry about that. Right, this is the front tree. It's had various applications in the past to have it pruned. This replicates what's been pruned in the past to maintain it in its current position. It has quite a low crown over the driveway, and it's got quite a wide crown. So the proposal is to just reduce the tips of the branches by about 1.5 metres on this tree. This is the tree to the rear, to the side of the property. The crown is actually quite close, if not touching the side of the house. So again, the proposal is to prune the side of the tree by 1.5 metres to clear the property and the windows, because currently this window here is almost obscured by the branches of the tree. So again, the pruning work replicates what's been given previously in permissions, and therefore the proposal is to approve subject to the conditions on the paper. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone wish to talk on this? No, okay, in that case I'll go for propose we approve. Okay, do I have a seconder? Thank you. Okay, those in favour? Amorous. Okay, there's approved. Okay, moving on to the next one. 20 Trinity Foyer. Okay, I'll call upon the officer to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is 20 the Trinity Foyer. This is to crown raise a sycamore to 4.5 metres all around. This is so that we can allow clearance to a security camera that's currently being obstructed by the tree, as you can see in this picture here.
Yeah, obviously the crown's quite low. You can see it's obstructed the lamppost. So the proposal is to remove the lower branches to a height of 4.5 metres to clear the lamppost, to clear the camera for security reasons for the cars beneath. Obviously, it's all within the British standard. It's acceptable works, and therefore the proposal is to raise no objection subject to the informatives on the paper.
Again, anyone wish to speak? Councillor Summersgill.
Can I just ask how high the sycamore is? I can't seem to see it there. 4.5 seems quite a large amount, but if it's 15 metre high or something.
4.5 metres from ground level. So basically any branch that's within 4.5 metres would be moved. And if you look at it, it's kind of, I think the lamppost is.
Yeah, it's asking how high the tree is itself.
Oh, that tree itself?
Yeah.
On measurement, I think it's about 18.5 metres. It's quite tall. It's quite a tall tree. I think I've got a picture if we look. That's the tree there. So you can see it kind of goes well above the height of the building. And you'd be removing just literally the lower foliage here to the lamppost.
Thank you. As long as it's not half the height of the tree.
Okay, Councillor Cleater. Councillor McGill, you turn your microphone off, please.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying on the height of the tree. In light of the debate that we had at the Housing Community Cohesion Pack around safety and women's safety particular, the fact that it's obstructed a CCTV camera and the lighting, I think in this instance, I think it's appropriate to approve the application.
Okay, are you proposing as per the papers then, Councillor
Yeah.
Cleater? Okay, I'm happy. Councillor Thompson? Okay, all in favour? Okay, unanimous. That is passed or approved. Okay, another tree one. So the College Road Practice Farming. There we go, Ryan. Who's the officer?
Thank you. So this one is an application for college practice farming. This is to lift one holm oak on the roadside to 5.5 metres from the ground and lift over the footpath to 3 metres from the ground and to clear a lamppost 1 metre. This is in line with KCC highway recommendations and footpath recommendations, just to keep them clear from obstructions. Here you can see the lamppost been obscured by the crown of the tree.
this is a few photographs just to sort of show the kind of obstruction that the tree's causing to some of the footpaths. Obviously, this is a desired footpath as people have gone across the grass. But again, if you look at some of the other photographs here, you'll see that the branches over the road are quite low, and some of them have actually been hit by higher sided vehicles. So again, to comply with highway standards, the raising of the canopy to 5 meters is sort of expressed on there is suitable and acceptable. So therefore, proposal is to approve subject to the conditions on the paper.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Harwood, you're indicating.
Yeah, on this one, I never like oak timber to be taken away. I know it's a holm oak, but the beetles don't mind. And it's quite wild, the landscaping along the edge of that site. And I wonder whether we should put a condition, or at least an informative, that we stack the resultant timber for biodiversity, which we do quite widely, just so that we get some benefit out of it at least.
We could, I mean, you've seen the tree, I haven't. So I think
in terms of what's being cut and the size of the timber, it's quite small. So in terms of making log piles, I don't think you get a sufficient amount to create that.
I mean, obviously that would be an informative, which we could put on. I mean, obviously it'd be the size of cut wood. So, I mean, it could go on there. And if they do have size wood that would fit that, then that's something we could do. I think obviously I'm just mindful that, is it an area that it wouldn't be like thrown around anywhere? Obviously, we've got to be mindful of areas that we stack wood where obviously, antisocial behaviour throws it everywhere.
No, I was just thinking, knowing the site quite well, inside the railings where the tall, in fact, in one of your pictures, it shows that there is potentially some areas where you can stack it up. But just put it as an informative, and then if it works, it works. Yeah, it's not a condition.
So then it would be approved subject to an additional formative for the stacking and
if appropriate, the resultant pulpwood would be stacked in a quiet corner of the landscaping for biodiversity. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I would keep. Sorry, let's just continue. Microphone off. Okay, so you're proposing, Tony? Okay, I'll second that. All in favour? Unanimous. Okay. Okay, that is approved. Okay, almost at the end. So, moving on then, we have the appeals list. So, I move to Mr. Jarman to introduce.
Yes, on the whole, pretty good, but some disappointing appeal decisions from an officer perspective. But I don't know if members are cognizant of this, and it goes back to the application at Montrose. So in the NPPF, I haven't read today's NPPF, as you can see, it's quite a thick document. But frequently, in the old NPPF, the definition of previously developed land did not include garden land in built-up areas. There's no definition of a built-up area, but if I think Martin does live in Headcorn, so his garden, his curtilage, would not be classed as previously developed land, what some people call brownfield land. So the NPPF, in terms of the definition of previously developed land, is silent on sites outside of the built-up area. So if one lives in a hamlet of just 3 large detached properties in Worms Hill, for instance, the developer argument is that that is previously developed land. Increasingly, our argument is just because government guidance is silent doesn't mean to say by logic it is acceptable. Sorry, it is quite convoluted. But increasingly, it is the case that inspectors do accept that argument. So I think I did have quite a lot of discussion with Councillor Springett and Councillor Spooner. We did lose an appeal for 4 houses in the back garden of a development, which was quite some distance outside of how we define the village of Staplehurst. I think if you go down the A229, you'll see the access. It stands out a mile. But sorry, this is a bit bleak at Christmas time. So there's that sort of background. And then you add in the new policy of significant harm to the countryside. It's becoming very difficult to prevent, 1 or 2 houses in people's back gardens, which tend to be quite large, in the countryside. So trying to be positive. I think we need a landscape character assessment like yesterday. And I must say, somebody who I'm obviously not from Kent, in any review of the local plan, in my view, we should say we really value the openness, the undeveloped nature of the countryside. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jarman. Any questions for Justice? Ken Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I referred to Sarah Green's email, which we received on Tuesday, which invited suggestions for future training sessions with regard to planning policy. In view of the remarks on the George earlier, I'm well aware of the fact that I got very close to, if not overstepped, guidance on what was appropriate in this context, following Councillor Springett's lead. We've heard from Councillor Harwood this evening and others on the need to strengthen our engagement with issues. I'm wondering, what should I be looking for when I first received my papers, not on the day of the meeting, but a week or sometime previous? We're asking questions about the things that we need to be doing urgently in the earliest possible stages. I've been very grateful to Mr. Jarman and others for the extensive training that I've received in being prepared for this meeting. It seems that there are some things that we need to be thinking about. I'm not proposing anything particular at this point, nor am I asking for a particular response, but it does seem that we've explored the need for some more robust engagement. I think Councillor Harwood's asked some things of officers, and it seems to me that there are some responsibilities with us too. So in the hearing of all the members here this evening, we agreed that this group should be maintained at a certain size in order to give robust treatment to the issues. I think this is the right conversation to be having. So if I can say that to you, Mr. Chairman, and in front of the officer, and ask everyone to give that due thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's slightly off the appeals question, but all valid. I would personally, from being on the planning committee on and off for the whole time I've been a councillor, I would say one thing that actually is quite useful is talking to the ward councillors that the applications in the area, because they'll have knowledge that you won't have, and they may have questions, and like probably with Yalding, for example, they will have information, and if I'd been the ward councillor, for example, and probably Councillor Russell did at the time, have those conversations and probably assumed that those kind of things were captured. So you do have to look at those conditions quite carefully. I know Councillor Harwood, sometimes we've come here and actually gone and changed all the conditions, much to Mr. Jarman's frustration, shall we say, sometimes. But that is within our powers to do so. There is that chance to do it. There's also a chance to actually talk to the officers on application. So if you have any questions on a certain application, please do contact the officer. And if there is an issue, you don't feel it's resolved, and there are briefings that can go ahead. I also think, have we got any site visits coming up like we've had in the past where we go look at good? Yeah.
I haven't got any suggested dates yet, but I'm looking at having at least 2 fun bus tours on very specific matters. And I was thinking of not just sort of like going out on a bus and observing things, but having a discussion afterwards or beforehand. Sort of thing.
Okay, any other questions for Doctors? Councillor Russell.
I'm really sorry. I just want to get it clear in my mind. So if you've got like a massive back garden, like, is there any limit to how many you could potentially put there then? Or if not, then, that's, and I know sometimes we get the applications and it's like the corner plot and then they sort of put another driveway in and put a house there. So presumably, is that covered by this type of back garden, previously developed land thing? I just want to kind of get a handle on number and place.
It's a good point. Arguably, and this is what the developers argue, because the NPPF is silent on garden land outside built-up areas, so in the middle of nowhere, just for example's sake. And unfortunately, inspectors do seem to agree with this argument that potentially, yes, you could build, I don't know, 5 houses on there. However, the good news from the NPPF definition is the government do say that doesn't mean to say that you can build on every bit of the curtilage. The $1 million question is that, how much is all? Is it 99%? Is it 90%? Is it 80%? They duck that issue.
Okay, any more? Going once, going twice? Okay, I'll draw the meeting to a close. Thank you, councillors.